A few weeks ago, the United States Treasury Secretary sat in front of the Senate and said something that should have been front-page news everywhere. He said that a group of Gulf states hold enough American assets that if they decided to sell them, it would cause what he called, and this is a direct quote, a disorderly sale of U.S. assets. In other words, the most financially powerful government in human history just admitted, on the record, that a handful of oil-exporting countries could, if they wanted to, break American markets. Now think about that for a second. Because if that is true, and it is, he said it under oath, then the picture of American financial dominance that most people carry around in their heads is wrong. Not a little wrong, structurally wrong. And the reason it is wrong goes back to a secret deal made in 1974 that most Americans have never heard of, that never got a press conference, and that quietly expired last year without a single major news outlet treating it as the story it actually was. That deal was the foundation of the entire post-gold monetary system, and the foundation is cracking. So here is what I want to work through in this video. First, what was the deal, and why did it require a cartel of oil producers to function? Second, why is that cartel now breaking down, and what exactly triggered it? Third, what are the Gulf states actually doing right now, and should the U.S. be worried? And fourth, what does any of this mean for inflation, for bond markets, and for the value of the assets you are holding right now? Because this is not just a story about oil prices. This is a story about why the dollar is worth what it is, how long that has been true, and whether it will still be true in 10 years. Let's get into it. Let me start with the arrangement itself. And to understand it properly, you need a quick analogy. Imagine you run the only coffee shop in a small town, and you decide that the only currency you will accept is tokens that you print yourself. For that rule to work, every person who wants coffee, and everyone wants coffee, has to first get your tokens. Your tokens become valuable not because of what they are, but because of what they buy. Now, the moment someone opens a second coffee shop that takes any currency, your tokens lose their privileged status. People can choose. And that choice is what makes your tokens worth a lot less. That is, stripped of its complexity. Exactly what the petrodollar system was. In 1974, after Nixon had already detached the dollar from gold and left it backed by essentially nothing, Henry Kissinger flew to Riyadh and made a deal. Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in dollars. Those dollars would be recycled into U.S. Treasury bonds, and in exchange, the U.S. would provide military protection and weapons. The deal was never publicly announced. Most of what we know about it only came out through a Freedom of Information request in 2016. What it created was something economists call structural demand for the dollar. Every country on Earth that needed oil had to first acquire dollars to buy it, which meant demand for the dollar was essentially infinite and automatic. And OPEC, the cartel of oil exporters, was the enforcement mechanism. Its job was to keep enough discipline among oil producers that the dollar-priced system stayed intact. Now, the question you should be asking is this: if the system worked so well for 50 years, what changed? And the honest answer is that several things changed simultaneously, which is usually how these slow structural shifts actually happen, not with one dramatic event, but with several reinforcing pressures that all arrive at once. The first pressure is that the underlying agreement expired. Quietly, in June of 2024, the formal petrodollar arrangement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, a 50-year agreement, simply lapsed. Saudi Arabia chose not to renew it. That alone did not blow up the system, but it removed the formal commitment. The second pressure is the Strait of Hormuz, and this one is harder to explain without numbers, so let me give you the numbers. Somewhere between 20 and 21% of the world's oil and gas transits through the strait every single day. When that strait is effectively closed, the Gulf states face an arithmetic problem that no amount of financial engineering fully solves. Saudi Arabia needed oil at roughly $100 a barrel to cover its basic government spending before the war. With export volumes constrained and shipping disrupted, some estimates put the break-even closer to $170 a barrel to generate equivalent revenue. Oil is not at $170 a barrel. That gap is being filled with borrowing. Saudi Arabia's external debt has hit levels it has never seen in modern history. Now this is where it gets interesting, and where the story most commentators are telling gets a little bit incomplete. The story you usually hear is that the UAE threatened to price oil in yuan, and the US panicked and handed over dollar swap lines. And that is basically accurate as far as it goes. But the more important underlying story is what that sequence of events reveals about the structural fragility of the petrodollar system itself. Think about what a swap line actually is. It is, in plain English, the world's most powerful central bank agreeing to lend dollars to a foreign government, so that foreign government does not have to sell its U.S. assets to get liquidity. The U.S. Treasury Secretary said publicly that swap lines were needed to, quote, maintain order in dollar funding markets and prevent the disorderly sale of U.S. assets. Read that again, slowly. The Gulf states hold enough dollar-denominated assets, roughly $2 trillion across the GCC, that if they started selling to raise cash, it would break things. The U.S. did not hand over swap lines out of generosity. It handed them over because the alternative was worse. And here is the steelman for the other side of this argument, because it deserves to be taken seriously. The dollar is still, by a significant margin, the dominant global reserve currency. In 2001, it made up roughly 72% of global foreign exchange reserves. Today, that number is somewhere in the mid-50s. That is a decline, but 55% is still not a collapse. So the argument that the dollar is about to be replaced is probably too dramatic. But here is what is not too dramatic. The dollar is losing its monopoly. And a monopoly and a dominant position are very different things. When the dollar had a monopoly, the U.S. could run large deficits, print money freely, and export inflation, because everyone needed dollars regardless. In a world where oil producers can choose between currencies at the margin, the cost of maintaining that privilege goes up. And right now, that cost is showing up in bond markets in a way that is genuinely constraining U.S. foreign policy. Here is what I mean. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yield is the single most important number in the global financial system. When it rises toward 4.4%, investors are effectively saying they want to be paid more to hold U.S. government debt. The bond market is not just pricing risk. It appears to be setting the tempo of foreign policy decisions. That is not how it is supposed to work. And the reason it is working that way is precisely because the structural demand for dollars, the automatic floor that the petrodollar system provided, has eroded. So how does this end? And honestly, this is where I have to be straight with you, because the honest answer is that the range of outcomes here is genuinely wide, and anyone who tells you they know which way this resolves is probably selling something. There are broadly two paths. Either the strait reopens relatively quickly, the Gulf states stabilize on dollar swap lines, and the current arrangement gets patched together for another cycle, which would mean a gradual grinding dollar decline over years rather than a rupture. Or the disruption extends long enough that commodity inflation becomes unmanageable, bond markets revolt, and the U.S. finds itself in the position of having to offer increasingly expensive concessions to maintain dollar primacy, which accelerates the timeline considerably. What is probably true regardless of which path we are on is that the era of the dollar as an unchallenged monopoly is structurally over. What replaces it is not yuan dominance. The yuan has its own deep structural problems around convertibility and capital controls. What replaces it is probably a messier, more multipolar arrangement where gold plays a larger role, where regional currencies handle more trade at the margin, and where the dollar remains important but no longer indispensable in the way it has been. Central banks have been buying gold at the fastest rate in 50 years. That is not a coincidence. That is the most conservative financial institutions on the planet quietly voting with their balance sheets. Because the coffee shop analogy I started with has a second part that I left out. When the second coffee shop opens, the token monopoly breaks. But the original shop does not close overnight. It just has to start competing on the merits. And that transition from monopoly to competition is where all the volatility lives.